Bullying as an adult. How to deal with it. I apologize. English is not my first language, but I will do my best. It's an incredibly lengthy story, and I will share it with some minor adjustments because I worry that someone might learn my identity. However, I don't believe that will happen since Reddit is such a vast platform. Still, I feel paranoid, which is why I am asking for advice anonymously online. I am a female college student, and I am nearly finished with my degree. Since I began studying a few years ago, I have become involved in student organizations not with the intention of advancing my career, as some others do, but rather because I wanted to engage in extracurricular activities and to help others. Through this organization, I encountered a classmate with whom I have always felt uneasy. I am shy and struggle with social situations, so I initially accepted that my behavior might be misinterpreted as arrogance. However, I feel that she labeled me as such from the moment we met and was always inclined to reject me, despite my intention to be friendly. In the beginning, we coexisted without issues, but after attending some classes together and having mutual friends, I attempted to integrate into her friend group. She seemed upset when I did, leading me to withdraw further and spend my free time with my main group of friends who had classes elsewhere. This situation was always peculiar. She would often be distant, exclusionary, and even rude towards me, but when she realized that I noticed her behavior and started to distance myself, she began treating me warmly and offered to help me. For instance, there was an occasion when I forgot my phone at home, and a teacher asked us to look something up online. She volunteered to team up with me for the task. Another time, she repeatedly offered to print my assignments on her home printer and bring them to me the following day so I wouldn't need to go to the library. I compensated her anyway, by the way. I felt utterly confused by her actions. As the months progressed, tensions escalated. One day, during a break, I was doing homework in the classroom while she spoke with a mutual friend in the hallway. She told him not to work with me on school projects and that it would be better for them to collaborate without me, as a senior classmate had promised to assist them if they excluded me. This made me very upset, so I approached the mutual friend to ask about it. He reassured me that he wouldn't do that and suggested I not make a big deal of the situation. However, I was still concerned, so I approached another friend who was also friends with her to inquire about the problem. He spoke to her and relayed that she didn't want to work with me anymore because of something negative that had occurred in my partner's family. I was aware of the issue with her family. However, it had happened when my partner was a child. It was a conflict involving adults, and she was never involved. Thus, I could not understand why she and I needed to be accountable for something that had taken place decades ago when we were young children and did not even know each other. I decided to confront her, and to avoid further complications, I requested a formal meeting of the entire organization to ensure there were witnesses. During this meeting, she admitted to many of the things I had mentioned, but then she began to cry, claiming that I had always excluded her and treated her poorly, which I had not. I simply didn't extend invitations because I sensed she didn't appreciate my company. At that point, everyone began comforting her as she was in distress, and I eventually apologized, believing her claims to be valid. I assured her that I would change to show her that I valued her and wanted to be friends. It's important to note that this individual has a concerning history regarding her mental health, having endured multiple suicide attempts and psychiatric hospitalizations. I am not privy to her diagnoses, but she has shared unusual tales about manipulating her psychiatrist and extracting confidential information from him, among other strange anecdotes. I do not want to stigmatize anyone. I struggle with depression and anxiety too, and I am also under medication. I recognize that being a psychiatric patient does not equate to being a bad person. Nevertheless, individuals in my program advised me to let her act as she did because she had so many problems, and that I, being the most stable of us, should understand her and be the adult in the situation. Yet, at that time, I was grieving the loss of my father figure and was profoundly depressed. From that moment onward, things were acceptable, as much as they could be, for a time, even though some odd events continued to occur. For example, there was an instance when a member of her group, the same guy who had advised me not to escalate things, invited me to the movies, canceled, and it turned out they had gone out without me. there was another occasion when a mutual friend did not invite me to his birthday celebration, so he could include her instead. However, we maintained a cordial relationship at college. Sadly, matters worsened when this girl befriended students from newer cohorts. While this in itself is not an issue, I began to notice that these new acquaintances began treating me poorly and spoke poorly of me. Compounding the situation was the senior girl I had mentioned earlier, who was also disparaging me. She claimed that I had defended a sexual assailant an untruth, as I had not defended him. He had assaulted me, and I was too frightened to confront him, which is why I hesitated to impose a penalty despite having the authority to do so. That is another challenging story, but I digress. Consequently, they twisted the narrative to claim I was his friend, which hurt me deeply because, after all, he had assaulted me. Soon, they started organizing events without informing me, and I only learned about them once flyers were sent out. This led me to feel exhausted, inadequate, guilty for not addressing my aggressor's actions, and insignificant. Ultimately, I resigned from my position, but prior to that, I wrote a resignation letter explaining my reasons, which ended up becoming a meme within my program. This led the senior girl to bombard me with numerous voice notes insulting me and fabricating stories, which nearly drove me to suicide. Ultimately, I did not end my life, but I still do not understand why. In the following months, I discovered the lies that had been circulated about me. I was falsely accused of being misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic, and supporting abusers, everything that is contrary to my character. They fabricated stories that I had insulted someone for being transgender, and they claimed I was best friends with an abuser. People who truly know me understand that I am not like that. A few individuals wanted to hear my side of the story and realized my narrative was more plausible and that I had evidence to support my claims, yet the majority of people never sought my perspective. Those months were torturous. I isolated myself, barely attended classes, and when I did go, I often skipped them. I managed to barely pass my courses, but the sole positive was that I learned to enjoy solitude and developed new hobbies. Nonetheless, it wasn't just the lies, they also bullied me in class by laughing when I participated, interrupting my speaking, or gossiping as I walked through the hallways. I further discovered that they made memes about me and mocked my appearance. At this juncture, I began attending therapy with a psychologist and psychiatrist. I was diagnosed with chronic depression and anxiety, prescribed medication, and received therapy. My medical records explicitly state that some of the patient's symptoms were aggravated by her academic situation. Seeking professional help significantly benefited me, though I couldn't help but notice that they never fully addressed my issues, even when I cried and experienced crises while recounting my experiences. My therapist simply advised me to ignore them. But how could I? They even began to perpetuate this violence in class, for instance, during a presentation with a teacher who was friendly with them. The teacher told me that it was their turn to present first in a highly demeaning manner, provoking laughter from the group. She and her friends were not only turning my classmates against me, but they were also influencing teachers with whom they were close. Consequently, therapy failed to help me cope with the situation, and I eventually abandoned it. For a considerable time, the medication was the sole thing keeping me alive. Later on, I discovered that this girl and her friends were defending two individuals, one a stalker and the other a rapist, while the victim of the latter was being intimidated by them. Furthermore, there were corruption scandals within the organization, but I wished to avoid going into detail to protect my anonymity. After these revelations, a few people in the community, although not many, began to support me. I formed new friendships and gradually pulled myself out of that abyss. Recently, it seems as though people have conveniently forgotten, or something similar, as those who used to harass and mistreat me now suddenly want to greet me and engage in casual conversation, as if nothing ever happened. I want to tell them to leave me alone, and that their behavior is despicable for failing to apologize for their actions. However, I feel that it's futile, that I would come across as overly dramatic or traumatized, so I remain silent. I realize that some of them are being hypocritical, while others understand their wrongdoing, yet no one is willing to apologize or openly discuss this situation. They prefer to sweep it under the rug. I am aware that it is not worth awaiting an apology, but I can't help but feel that their refusal to acknowledge their mistakes renders my feelings and dignity insignificant, as if I were merely a punching bag for them to abuse without consequence. The girl who has bullied me for years has faced no repercussions for her actions. She remains friends with teachers and administrators. Although a large portion of the community disapproves of her behavior, they continue to treat her well to maintain peace, and because they fear facing what I have endured. She behaves as she pleases within the student organization, treats others terribly, and neglects her responsibilities, but no one addresses her actions. This semester, she traveled abroad and is living her best life, while I find myself still feeling miserable. She has never fully ceased her bullying. Before her departure, she ensured that rumors spread about me claiming I had engaged in sexual activity in a classroom on campus, which is entirely untrue. People may not necessarily believe her, but they refuse to put an end to it. I have spent years attempting to distract myself from this situation. I strive not to dwell on it and enjoy my friends and good times, yet I cannot suppress the feelings of anger, frustration, and sadness. I wonder whether anyone truly views this matter as seriously as it should be. Is this not serious, or do adults simply normalize violence to this extent? I have spoken to authority figures, teachers, psychologists, and family members, and all I receive in response is advice to move on, or let it go. But how? How can I move on if they continue to provoke me and refuse to stop? If they have fabricated so many untruths and insulted me in countless ways? Naturally, I desire to put this behind me. I want to be happy again, but I do not know how. Recently, I have contemplated death more than I care to admit, as I am at a loss for how to escape this profound misery stemming from this deep wound. I wish to believe that I will feel better once I graduate and no longer have to see these individuals, but how can I be certain? I'm afraid I will feel like this forever. Any comments, advice, or suggestions would be appreciated. I am not afraid of being wrong. I simply seek honest guidance. Story 2. I opened up to a guy friend, then he confessed his feelings despite my long-term boyfriend. I felt trapped and uneasy. Time to leave. I believe some context is necessary before I present my actual question. I apologize for any language mistakes. English is not my primary language. I am an 18-year-old female, and my friend, who is also 18 years old, met a man whom we nicknamed Basti, who is 34 years old. I understand that the age difference raises some concerns, especially considering we are both quite young. We all attend the same vocational school, which is the correct term. My friend and I are there to pursue further education before entering the workforce, while Basti chose to leave the military and seek training for a different career. He mentioned that he missed the school environment. This school accommodates individuals of various ages from 16 and older, so encountering people in their 30s is not unusual, and the younger students generally do not mind. My friend became acquainted with Basti during a conference since she served as our class representative last year, and he began conversing with her. They developed a friendship, and he started to socialize with us. I did not have any issues with his age, but we were both cautious as we were still 17 at that time. Initially, he mostly interacted with my friend because I tend to be reserved and shy around new individuals. However, he eventually encouraged me to open up, and our friendship seemed to flourish. A few months later, I discovered that Basti and my friend had started dating. She was underage, but in our country, the law allows individuals aged 16 and above to consent to relationships. I felt uneasy about this development because he did not seem like her type at all, and the age difference concerned me. However, I supported her as long as she was content. Basti was genuinely kind to her, comforting her after difficult times with her father and looking out for her. Things took a troubling turn when he forced a kiss on her while she was upset, leading my friend to realize that she was not ready for a relationship, particularly not with him, resulting in their breakup. I thought our friendship had returned to normal, but things changed when Basti began to message me more frequently afterward. His messages were typically benign, such as "good morning" and "how are you doing?" which he seemed to mean due to my mental health struggles. I appreciated his concern and felt a sense of comfort in becoming closer to him as a friend, although I remained cautious. There is some additional context that may be relevant. My friend is not always the kindest towards me, and I recognize that. She occasionally speaks unfavorably about me, whether covertly or overtly, and it is sometimes unclear if she genuinely believes the things she says. She once called me useless and acknowledged that she meant it, which is quite revealing. Basti ultimately agreed with me that her behavior was unacceptable and that I deserved better. His affirmation meant a lot to me, leading me to trust him a bit more. Eventually, he persuaded me to go for a walk with him as friends, without my friend, so I could stop isolating myself in my room. I enjoyed our time together immensely. I spoke far more than I typically do, and we discovered several common interests, which led me to start liking him as a friend. Although I was initially anxious because he is older, our outing was enjoyable. However, everything shifted when he confessed that he had strong feelings for me, despite knowing I was in a long-distance relationship with my boyfriend, who is also 18 years old, and with whom I had been together for 5 years. Naturally, I declined his advances, which made him sad. This affected me because he had previously shared that his former girlfriend had left him following a miscarriage, so I encouraged him not to lose hope in finding love. I believe this led him to think he could continue pursuing me. Following this, our interactions deteriorated. Initially, his messages remained friendly, but they soon escalated to inappropriate inquiries such as, "What are you wearing? What is underneath?" And, "Have you ever engaged in self-pleasure?" Questions that made me uncomfortable, so I evaded answering. Then he started inviting another guy into our conversations and asked them what they should do together in explicit detail, something else I tried to avoid addressing. Whenever he noticed me dodging these topics, he would say things like, "Just one more question, okay? Then I will leave you alone." This unsettling pattern persisted. When my friend finally cut ties with him, it stemmed from his attempt to invite her for a surprise several kilometers away, intending for just the two of them to go together, which was clearly suspicious. She refused to go, particularly because he had not divulged any details despite her expressing fear, to which he responded with, "You need to learn trust." I later learned that he had purchased concert tickets as a surprise for her, but that plan clearly backfired. My friend assumed I had stopped responding to him, but she was not upset when she discovered I had not, and she actually found it amusing that he believed he had a chance with me. Meanwhile, my discomfort around him continued to grow. We met only once more in December last year at a Christmas market. I enjoyed that outing and appreciated his gift, a necklace that reflected my interests. We had dinner together, and the day was delightful until he began confessing his feelings again, becoming despondent when I reiterated that I could not engage in a romantic relationship with him. I struggled to say no, fearing it may hurt someone's feelings, but I managed to assert myself this time. He seemed to reluctantly accept my stance, but still tried to evoke feelings of guilt in me, and the day concluded on a somber note. He offered to drive me home and expressed concern for my well-being when I felt drained, but he still left feeling melancholic. This sets the stage for our current relationship. We have barely communicated since that encounter. I feel guilty for not reaching out, especially after he thoughtfully gave me a Christmas gift, which showed his consideration for my interests. However, I no longer feel comfortable around him. At times, his affection felt good and made me question my feelings, but ultimately, he is too old for me to be comfortable with romantically. Even though he can be kind, I constantly sense he is attempting to manipulate my emotions. He is aware that I feel conflicted about our relationship. I recognize that I should not be an emotional support for a man who is almost twice my age. I have genuinely cared for him because he shows concern for me. Nonetheless, following his inappropriate messages and his relentless pursuit of romance, I feel unable to continue engaging with him. He does not comprehend that I am only interested in friendship, and his behaviors are jeopardizing even that connection. I do not want to be the person who remains for the gifts and support only to sever ties without reason. I am often conflicted, aware of the better choice yet struggling to follow through because my reason and empathy are at odds. My intuition tells me he is suspicious and inappropriate, indicating I should definitely sever ties with someone who is a man-child that cannot take no for an answer from a girl who is just 18 at this point. My emotions remind me he is still a human being and that nobody deserves to be suddenly abandoned by someone who cares about them. It has now been 2 weeks since we last spoke, and I am uncertain whether he has given up and considers our friendship over. So, am I the asshole if I choose to officially end the friendship?